a top Justice Department official apparently tried to get to the IRS whistleblowers before their congressional testimony, just to find out what was going on. What are you going to say to Congress? And it's kind of interesting. We're learning a lot right now about the Justice Department and its involvement in the Hunter Biden investigation or non-investigation, take your pick. But for more on this, I want to turn to the White House correspondent for the New York Post, Stephen Nelson, who joins us on the phone. Stephen, good to talk to you today, sir.
Great to be back, Vince.
It's so you've got a report here that you put out overnight last night on the Justice Department and its contacts with Hunter Biden as well as the whistleblower teams. What can you tell us?
Sure. So I would assume that you, of course, and many of your listeners are familiar broadly with the claims of the IRS whistleblowers, the two men who investigated Hunter Biden for tax fraud and other crimes for several years, or 5 years in one case. They alleged that there was a Department of Justice cover-up, essentially, that shielded President Biden and also shielded Hunter from more severe penalties. The latest development is a little bit complicated, and I'm going to try to put it in really simple terms for the radio audience, because this is a bit more complex than previous revelations from the whistleblowers. But essentially what happened is a senior Justice Department official, someone at the main Justice Department, an associate deputy attorney general, reached out to both the whistleblowers' attorneys and convened a meeting with Hunter Biden's attorneys and Delaware U.S. Attorney Weiss. Why this matters, and of course this is a bit confusing as I prefaced, why this matters is because it gives the appearance that the main Justice Department was steering the ship rather than Weiss's office when it comes to the Hunter Biden investigation.
Yes.
And that's important, of course, because Attorney General Merrick Garland said under oath that Weiss was independent and there would be no political interference in the case. And these latest revelations regarding the senior Justice Department officials' actions call into question whether Weiss truly was independent or whether he was not, as accused.
And Garland has insisted over and over, as you just said, that David Weiss had broad authority, that he was independent, that he could take this investigation anywhere he wanted, and that there would be no interference. And sure enough, now we keep finding out more and more information. Actually, the people who work much more directly for Merrick Garland seem to have a hand in the way that this Hunter Biden investigation was going.
Right. And, it's frankly kind of amazing that we've gone so many months without Merrick Garland appearing on Capitol Hill to answer these questions. They've really lingered for months. And sometime this fall, of course, he is going to be going to the Hill and will be asked directly. But the whistleblowers said that that Delaware U.S. Attorney Weiss, he attempted to bring tax fraud charges, including felonies, against Hunter Biden in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C., where he earned the money related to his foreign business dealings and where he lived at the time, but was blocked by U.S. attorneys appointed by President Biden. Now, Weiss and Garland have both kind of given the impression that that's not accurate in public statements, but they haven't really been put under oath and really grilled on this matter. And this latest revelation seems to bolster the accusation that Weiss was not indeed in charge.
Yeah, and these whistleblowers in their testimony, which was jaw-dropping and unfortunate for our country, if it's true, what they described is you have Justice Department officials who are constantly working to mitigate any concern or inquiry into the Biden family, to include people who were working within David Weiss's office. A woman by the name of Leslie Wolf kept on popping up as interfering in the Biden investigation and saying that investigators couldn't go down the road of asking about Dad or the big guy. That really stands out.
Well, I mean, there's a real litany of allegations here. Not only that you're not supposed to be asking about Dad or the big guy. The IRS investigators allegedly did not get full access to Hunter Biden's laptop. They weren't told about the $10 million bribe allegation involving the Ukrainian gas company Burisma, despite that being referred to Weiss's office. Leslie Wolf and her team allegedly tipped off Hunter Biden's attorneys to a plan to search their a storage locker in Northern Virginia that had corporate material in it, allegedly blocked an attempt to search a cottage on President Biden's Wilmington home, allegedly tipped off Hunter Biden's legal team about an intended approach to interview him about the allegations against him. So it's a real long list here. And this matters, of course, in part because House Republicans are preparing likely to launch an impeachment inquiry to President Biden's role in his son's business dealings. And of course, the alleged cover-up of the investigation into his son's business dealings is going to be an important part of that impeachment inquiry.
Have you noticed anything different at the White House as you cover the White House and talk to White House officials? I did see, for instance, after Joe Biden returned from his many vacations, that I saw there was a clip of Peter Doocy trying to get his attention. And it was one of the first times I've ever seen Biden not actually give Peter Doocy his attention. He refused. He just looked around the room. Doocy kept saying, "Mr. President, Mr. President, Mr. President," and finally just asked him, "How's the campaign going?" trying to draw him out. Nothing. He couldn't get him to speak at all. Have you noticed kind of a vibe shift at the White House on talking to the press, especially on questions like this?
Yeah, I think that's a smart observation of yours. Karine Jean-Pierre has not called on me to ask her a question in 3 months. The New York Post, which I represent in the briefing room, we're the second most read U.S. newspaper when you count online traffic. We're fourth largest in print. The White House press secretary has just blackballed us because this has, of course, been an area that we've covered very closely since reporting on Hunter Biden's laptop. President Biden himself, I have asked him many times various questions about this matter. He very effectively brushes them off. Just today, I asked him about House Speaker McCarthy's request that President Biden turn over his personal bank records to Congress. President Biden chuckled to himself and said, "Let's talk about why we're here at FEMA headquarters." But he had taken 3 totally unrelated questions about FEMA and the hurricanes just before that. So he clearly has no desire to directly engage with the substance or with the congressional oversight. The press secretary, it's basically the same deal. This obviously is going to have to change when Republicans launch an impeachment inquiry, as seems inevitable.
Yes. And the White House continues to take this tact of trying to establish distance from Hunter Biden, suggesting that these are his problems. He's a private citizen. If you have any questions, you should ask his representatives. This has nothing to do with Joe Biden. And the response to that is that actually it has everything to do with him. It's about the ethics of the White House and Hunter Biden's access to power and the ways in which he used that. It seems like the kind of questions the White House should be answering.
Well, part of the way you establish distance is you don't engage with people who are asking questions or people who are likely to raise these matters. One of the amazing things that Hunter Biden's former business partner, Devin Archer, revealed on July 31st was that Joe Biden, as sitting vice president, attended not 1 but 2 dinners in Georgetown with his son's Kazakhstani, Russian, and Ukrainian benefactors. And I don't think that has been raised in the briefing room. It's just amazing. Devin Archer also said that Joe Biden was on 20 speakerphone calls with business partners. He said that the founder of Burisma, who allegedly gave a bribe to the Bidens, slipped away for a private call to Washington with Hunter. He said that President Biden had coffee with the incoming CEO of a Chinese state-backed investment fund that Hunter launched 2 weeks after he arrived with his father on Air Force Two in Beijing. There are a series of just really spectacular allegations out there, but the White House manages, as you say, to create distance by just not really engaging in them. We don't hear anything about them. Which has been kind of remarkable.
And it's also target-rich, too, Stephen. It must drive you crazy not to have these questions even asked or have an opportunity to ask them on a very frequent basis because, as you're talking about all of these arrangements, I was just thinking, when Joe Biden came into office, Hunter Biden, and I know you asked about this, he kept having – he held an equity stake in this Chinese private equity firm for a while. And the question kept being put to the White House. I believe it was you who kept asking, when are you going to divest? When are you going to divest? When is Hunter going to divest from this thing? He finally divests, and he sells it to Kevin Morris, the Hollywood attorney, who then turns around and finances Hunter Biden's tax debts and then pays for flying him to and from his Arkansas paternity hearings and everything. So it's the whole thing is a really important a series of events that require more questions and answers.
Yeah, and you mentioned that, but there's a whole lot more. There's a report that the First Son has sold more than $1 million worth of art to anonymous buyers. One buyer, I think, bought almost $900,000 worth of the art. I think it was 1.3 million in total. But I mean, we don't know who this anonymous buyer is, and we know that one of the other people who was identified, she frequently has visited the White House, including to meet with the president, and got a appointment to a presidential board. I don't think that there's been much direct questioning about that in the briefing room either. The White House just really has not addressed it. These things do break through occasionally. There was the allegation made by the IRS whistleblowers that there was a WhatsApp message sent by Hunter Biden to a Chinese government-linked business associate saying that I'm sitting here with my father and there will be retribution if a agreed-upon business deal is not fulfilled. 10 days within 10 days of that, $5.1 million was transferred to Biden-linked accounts. In that instance, it really did break through in the briefing room, and they had to address it. But there are, as you mentioned, a real constellation of things here. It's a target-rich environment, and so many of the targets are never really aired.
Finally, in terms of the logistics of how close Biden gets to the press or whether or not he ever has to answer questions, I know you've been working there for a while. Have you seen it change? Have they tightened up the opportunities that reporters even have a chance to ask questions?
I haven't really noticed a whole lot in that regard. Earlier in his presidency, they very tightly controlled the reporters allowed near him. They had a system where you had to RSVP electronically for all of the large indoor events, and then they would mysteriously select who got to go in. And that caused a real uproar among the press because certain people were clearly being discriminated against, and most of the press corps signed on to a letter challenging that. And so they've eased up on those kind of access restrictions. And in terms of him taking questions, he does it sometimes, but there are different ways that presidents differ from person to person. And President Trump, he did a lot of interviews. He did a lot of press conferences. Biden does very few interviews or press conferences. He is yet to, as president, do an interview with a print newspaper reporter who might drill down on some of these things. And he hasn't done a major press conference really since last year. They're mostly the foreign leader ones, which frankly can be kind of staged. The two Americans or one American, and however many foreign reporters get selected, and those really don't have the variability in them that a freewheeling press conference might.
That's right, and there's a lot of behind-the-scenes horse trading that usually leads to those to who gets called upon for those questions too. It's kind of the whole thing is wild. Stephen Nelson, White House correspondent for the New York Post. I really appreciate your time as always, and please keep asking all the important questions whenever you get the opportunity. Thank you, sir.